I'm interviewing Arthur Bancroft, who is a survivor of HMAS Perth and the survivor of the Rakuyo Maru. I hope I've got the pronunciation correct. And the interviewer is Lieutenant Colonel Peter Winstanley. Arthur, thank you very much for agreeing to talk with me today, and to Merla, who we'll be speaking with later. Could you start by telling us where you were born, when you were born, where you went to primary school and where you went to high school, and what your first job was?
Yeah, I was born in Fremantle on 24th of November 1921, and I went up the country shortly after being born, where my father was building up there, and so I was about 6 years of age before I came down to Perth City, and we lived in Crawley for a few years. We started primary school. I had touched at primary school training in the country, and then I came down to the city, and I went to my first primary school in the city. It was at Nedlands, and after that we moved to Subiaco, and I went to Sunda Straits Primary School, and got up to junior. At the end of my 6th class there, I had to go to high school, and I went to Claremont High School, which meant young guys trained, because Subiaco High School, they all went to Perth Boys School, and Merla was I didn't know her then, but she went to Perth Ladies College from Subiaco School. So we were split up that way. And so when I left did the junior certificate in Claremont, and passed that out when I was 15, and I joined the Union Bank of Australia in Fremantle shortly after, and I stayed in the bank then until such time as I joined the Navy in 1940. What was the next question?
Yes, well, you've enlisted in 1940. Where did you do your initial training?
Well, 1940, I did my first 3 months in Fremantle at the old HMAS 11, because I joined the Navy as a communication man, because I didn't, at that stage, I didn't want anybody else, anyone who could had the education qualifications go to communications, which I did. And after about nearly 3 months there, I got a severe throat infection and got put into sick bay at HMAS 11. And in the meantime, the draft of communicators that they got together left me high and dry, and they went to Flinders Naval Depot in Melbourne, HMAS Capital.
Yes.
So when I got out of hospital, I spoke to the commanding officer at HMAS 11 and said, well, when is the next communication draft going over to Flinders Naval Depot? Well, he says, another 3 months. I said, the war will be over. He says, why? I said, I joined the Navy to fight a war, not to hang around here. I said, well, what have you got in mind? I said, I believe there's a Seaman's draft going next week. I'd like to be on that. Oh, that sounds good. Approved. And so I suddenly became a seaman rather than a communicator. And that's I went from there across to Flinders Naval Depot, HMAS service, and did my basic training there for 3 months. And before interesting part of that is that I'd been approached by the South Melbourne Football Club to play football for them, because I've been playing football for Subiaco, and they said, Nate Davis said, you better get this bloke. So they said, will you come down and play football in Melbourne? I said, yes. So the next morning I called up before the captain of HMAS Flinders. He says, what's this nonsense about you playing football down in Melbourne, Bancroft? I said, yes, sir. He said, did you join the Navy to play football or fight a war? oh, fight a war. So he said, no, it's nonsense about playing football. You'll play for the Navy or not at all. So I ended up playing for the Navy. Right. Everybody else who came over after us, too many of them, they all played league football.
Yeah.
And I did. Yeah. Anyway, had a lot of fun playing football for the Navy.
Yeah. Now, when were you taken on as a crew of the HMAS Perth?
In October 1941.
And where did you initially? Where initially was the ship deployed to?
Yeah, after it was still being repaired after the damage done in the Mediterranean, and once it was ready for sea, they had a lot of fun. They had a bit of sabotage was on board, and we think it was communist sabotage, including the flooding of one magazine, including the cutting of all the wiring and the bridge from the bridge down through to the engine rooms, and so at one stage I ended up on the 4-inch guns, and so when we were on duty at night time, we were given a pistol, a whistle and a torch. Now if you see anything suspicious, you shine your torch, blow your whistle and then fire. That was our instructions, because there's a lot of this funny business going on. Anyway, I didn't have to do any of those. But we went out and did a lot of shakedown cruises from there, and then went across to we went across to other shakedown cruises. We ended up with a convoy going up to Port Moresby, and we left the convoy at Port Moresby, which had the chockers, as I might call them, from Liverpool Camp on it. We didn't know who they were on it, but we'd been camped with them. We left the Perth and went there up and did a 2-week camp with the Army, AIF and chockers at Liverpool Army Camp, and it was them that we convoyed up to New Guinea, and they were the ones that went up on the Cicada track.
Yes.
We didn't know that till after the war.
So how was it that the vessel ends up over in really Southeast Asia?
Well, from there we went across to it's not Hawaii, so picked up an American convoy that was coming in, and we brought them into Brisbane because they couldn't take them to the Philippines because of the invasion there, and so we left them at in Australia, and we went back down to Sydney. So when they left Brisbane, apparently they headed up north, so they didn't know where they were going. But to jump ahead again, we met the same people. We met the American transport. We met them in a prison camp in Java. So, but anyway, we got back to Singapore, and then we had to go over and transport a convoy coming over from New Zealand of Americans, and helped to convoy them into Melbourne. It was the first lot of American troops that came into Melbourne. And we were there for a matter of about 3 days, and we were called back on board to break leave, and we took off. We didn't know where we were going, but we headed west. We went over to Fremantle, and from there we had about 3 days leave and whatnot, and then they got the ship ready for what we didn't know, but they took the piano off and they reballasted and took a lot of unnecessary equipment off and put on other necessary equipment, and then the ship took off, and we had no idea where we were going, but we were heading north, and we were taking a convoy of tankers and things up to Java, and we got about halfway up to about level with Carnarvon Way, and they got called back, and we just sailed through the convoy, and they gave us a hearty cheer. We gave them a signal, and off we headed north. We had no idea where we were going. obviously things had got pretty bad up there. We got up about level with Darwin, and was unbeknownst enough, so they started bombing Darwin. But we got up to Java and into Batavia. That was our first port call there. Then they started bombing there, and we were alongside a tanker refuelling in the first bombing array. And so we let fire with everything we had. We had 6-inch and 4-inch guns going. And they split up their flotilla of planes easily.
Yes.
And I think we hit one because that sort of disappeared, a little bit of smoke from it coming out. And then we left there and came along shore, along the harbour. And when we were again refuelling or redoing something that we weren't going to stay there. And we eventually went from there up to Surabaya. And it was at Surabaya that we joined up with the ABDA fleet, the Australian, British, Dutch, Australian fleet. That became what's known as the ABDA fleet. And after 24 hours in Surabaya Harbour, we took off. And we were out looking for a Japanese invasion fleet somewhere out off the shore there. And it took us 2 days before we eventually found up with them. And then the Battle of Java Sea started. And that was a rather unique sort of a battle because we had the Dutch admiral in charge, the best seaman who knew all about war from the Mediterranean was our captain. He should have been in charge, but the Dutch admiral had never seen a shot fired. He was in charge. They had 2 Dutch destroyers, the American Houston 8-inch cruiser, the Exeter, the British cruiser, and good old HMAS Perth. Plus about 8 or 10 destroyers. Unbeknownst to us, the Japanese had about 8-inch cruisers, plus a lot of destroyers. And so the battle lasted close on. Somebody wrote a poem. They said, "A Friday afternoon at 4, the forces met loud of the war of many ships in Cullinan. That day, that night was history made." So that was the start of the Java Sea battle.
Yes.
And that lasted until about 8 o'clock at night. About that time, the Java and Deroiter, the two Dutch cruisers, were hit by torpedoes and sunk very quickly. The Exeter, the British cruiser, well known for the Battle of the River Plate, that got hit by an 8-inch shell in the one of the engine room, and slowed her down, and so she had to make for port to get some repairs done. The Houston had another 8-inch shell went through her bows, and the only ship that was not hit, the capital ship, was HMAS Perth. And the question might be, well, why was that? I said, because we had a captain who knew what to do. We were having 8 American 8-inch shells, and we couldn't fire, it was too far, not in range. And we could hear 8-inch shells whizzing through our rigging from the Japs. We did whoof, whoof, and these shell go, and the next lot will land short of us. And so the captain, every time, he just shifted, isn't he? So it just kept shifting it. He's a great captain, isn't he? He should have been in charge of the whole operation.
Yes.
And so by the time 8 o'clock at night, I think it was, by the time we break off, with the 2 Dutch cruisers sunk, the Exeter having to leave us, and a couple of destroyers had been sunk, and we were starting to run out of low on fuel, and the captain Waller decided to break off, and he got instructed then from shore to head towards Java, towards
Batavia
again, and there's just Perth and the Houston went there. And it was there we left around about 6 or 7 o'clock at night to go through Sunda Straits to get out into the Indian Ocean. The Dutch intelligence, in inverted commas, said that the Sunda Straits were clear and they could go out through that way. So 11 o'clock at night we're steaming along and the battle stations being on the safe side and going straight into the Japanese invasion fleet. They were already there, they were landing their troops on the shore, and we were suddenly surrounded by something like 16 to 18 Japanese destroyers and cruisers. And so that's when the battle started. We were in the middle of it. And again, with the captain like we had, we didn't take a hit on the ship for nearly the battle started about 11 o'clock, and about midnight before we actually took a hit on the ship. We took about 11 o'clock till we were right into the middle of the battle for nearly an hour before they hit us. And we were on 4-inch gun. All guns are on independent control because there's too many targets to try and do ordinary electronic control. And we were firing star shells to show up where the Japanese ships were. Well, on a 4-inch gun, in between all the work we were doing, I could see Japanese sailors behind the guns on their destroyers from the star shells.
Yes. So
that's how close they were, and they were firing everything they could at us. We were everything on the ship that could fire was firing. Twin for a 6-inch at forward, twin 6-inch at aft, the twin 4-inch on starboard and port, machine guns sitting on anti-aircraft guns. Anything could fire on the first was being fired, including a machine gun out of the
crow's nest, was
it? No, well, out of the aircraft. It's only out there firing machine guns.
Yes, yeah.
It was at a bedlam.
Yeah.
And it was were you scared? I said, we were too busy to be scared.
Yeah.
And it was just utter bedlam.
Yes.
And until eventually around about midnight they started hitting us because we were, and shortly after that we took a first torpedo that slowed us down. And that followed another torpedo, and at that stage the captain said, prepare to abandon the ship. That was his order. And then another torpedo hit abandon ship, every man for himself, good luck. There's all we found out later, the lifeboats had been smashed, and so that was his last order. Prepare to abandon ship, every man for himself, good luck. He unfortunately didn't make it himself. And so when the ship took the 4th torpedo and she heeled over very sharply, I was on the port side, and so I had to get over the starboard side because she was going down by the port side. So I jumped overboard from the starboard